here it is, another Friday afternoon Green Rush Live. Hi, everybody. I thank God every day, but especially on Fridays because it is the beginning of the weekend. If your week actually ends on Saturday or Sunday. I worked weekends for 30 years, folks, so I know what a Wednesday through Sunday schedule is all about. That being said, we've got a great show for you all over the next couple of hours here. I'm going to be joined by a very special guest host who has his regular show called the Talking Hedge. His name is Josh Kincaid. He hails from Seattle, Washington. Josh, welcome to the guest hosting position of Green Rush Live.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Tell us a little bit about your background rather than me reading about, you're a portfolio risk analyst, blah, 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 blah. Tell us a little bit about your background. Go ahead.
So I left Wall Street about 9 years ago. I was managing a $650 million fund with Capital One. Jumped into the cannabis space, naively thinking I could start a cannabis cafe. And there was a Class C felony that was put on cannabis cafes specifically in Washington State. So I jumped on board to write a bill to try and overturn that. Fast forward 6 years later, chairman of that committee, nothing's happened yet. COVID didn't help, but learned a lot, right? I don't think practice makes perfect. I think failure does. And there's been a lot of projects I've been a part of in the cannabis industry as a consultant with the Super Chronics, things I've reported on with the Talking Hedge podcast and things I've seen. And it's a brutal industry. So excited to see from an attorney's standpoint the challenges and issues from a compliance. Just from that standpoint alone, it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. And joining us now from the law firm Greenspoon Marder are two attorneys, Nick Richards and Michael Berwick. Guys, thank you both for coming on today, and I appreciate you delaying it 1 week. Because we had no choice. That being said, Nick, how are you doing?
Josh, I'm getting, last time I was on this show, the guest guy, he was really tough on me. And so I'm getting ready for you, Josh. I'm getting really serious over here, Jimmy. So, you got the lawyers on and we're dressed for the occasion, and I'm ready to go.
All right. And Michael, you certainly have a tough act to follow. That's all I got to say. How are you doing?
I'm okay, Jimmy. I'm not even going to try to follow that, but I'm speechless. I just got Nick is sort of our fearless leader of our cannabis group at Greenspoon Marder, and you're beginning to understand why. It's really It's a combination of intellect, experience, and what we in the law call the catch-all, all of the above. And I think what you just saw would fall into the catch-all. He is a tough act to follow.
But I'll tell you what, I love the personality, and I love someone who is very uncomfortable being on camera, right? I mean, that's the thing.
That's why I'm hiding behind the glasses, Jimmy.
I like that look, actually.
He's awesome. He's just awesome.
And yet,
Jimmy, we're really excited to be on the show today, and really excited to talk to your audience. And it's great to work with you. And are we talking taxes today? I got to say, as a lead into that, because I do want to be co-host one time too.
Okay.
Taxes got sexy when cannabis came along. Okay, so there you go.
No. Did you say something about taxes? Guys, I had the memo here different. I thought we were talking about Texas, but
Texas. Oh.
This is good. We've unleashed a couple. Here are very serious attorneys on our show on Friday afternoon, and they're the ones that are carrying on with their personalities, which is fine, guys, because you're going to be on for an hour, so we have some time to kill and fill, and I certainly appreciate that. When I get asked a lot, whenever people come up to me and know that I'm in the cannabis space, they always say, what's a good investment? And by the way, I have no idea about investing. That being said, I always say invest in a good law firm, because they're going to be successful no matter what the law says, because they're going to either write the law or they're going to challenge the law. Is that accurate? Yeah. Who's going to take that one?
Well, we
Mike?
have challenged a few laws. Absolutely. I haven't written any myself. I've tried to tell the IRS how to write a few. They don't seem to like what I say generally, but yeah, I think that's right. And I think that it's something, we're sort of creating the rules as we go in many situations, and a lot of times you need a good lawyer to be able to help the regulators understand how to come to the right decision. And that's sometimes an interesting dance. Most regulators don't want you to tell them. They want to get to that on their own. And sometimes that takes somebody who's somewhat artful in the art of persuasion, which my friend Mike is amazing. He persuaded me long ago.
Thank you. I'll take all of that. I'm a Leo, so it's all good. But I would add to that. I think Nick's got me now at sort of like in the sort of the Aquarius kind of stage. But I think I would add to that, Jimmy, that everything that Nick said with an exclamation point, but I would add to that it's really, I see our role kind of as the navigators, and to the extent that there's lack of clarity there on what, to continue the analogy, there's charts there, if you will, that are put in place by not only the Congress, but by the executive branch in terms of how those laws are enacted on a more granular level. And it's sort of our job, and by that I mean the IRS and so forth, it's our job to sort of chart that course for our clients while staying on track and coloring within the lines. But there's also in some cases a lack of clarity, and I think what we like to do is, without coloring outside the lines, is push a little bit at some of the boundaries that are set up in terms of pushing back and saying, hey, you didn't make this clear at all. What did you mean by this? And that kind of thing. And it just matters, to the extent that we do that, on really what the risk tolerance is of the client. And sometimes we have clients that are more aggressive from an ROI standpoint, and they'd like to really push it. And sometimes we have clients that are saying, you know what, I don't want to get wrapped up in a back and forth with the IRS or with any other governmental organization. I'm comfortable just staying right within the parameters of the map, if you will.
And this is when I get to call on Josh to ask the first question, and I'm not even going to tee him up, because he knows the most obvious question to ask when you're talking about taxes in the cannabis space. How's that? Is that teeing you up, Josh? Go ahead.
I'm gonna defer 280E for a second, because I had a follow up. I wanted to know what kind of keeps you guys up at night. You talked about kind of navigating and not having clarity. So is it the valuations are kind of sketchy? You got $420 million valuation, seems kind of arbitrary. Seems like you're going to have investor lawsuits at some point. What keeps you up at night? Is it the valuations? Is it compliance and lack thereof? Is it federal intervention at some point?
That's what keeps me up, by the way. Go ahead, Nick. What keeps you up at night? Don't and make it clean, will you please? Thank you.
You saw where I was going. No. Yeah, I don't know. Federal intervention does not concern me. And so I want to make that clear. And I think that I've been in the cannabis industry for almost 10 years now, I'd say. And I have never seen, the feds come down on a professional in a legalized cannabis, industry in a way that I thought was, like you used to see, right? So not that I don't stay up on that. I worry for my clients. And as you approach, with me, it's usually about money. We're going to get to taxes next, and so taxes are almost always about money. And there are events that come up in challenging the IRS or the state or the local authorities around tax matters, and in the end, it comes down to that money, and that'll keep me awake at night when those events are coming down, and I'll hope that I can do as good for my client as I hope to.
And that is the root of all evil. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, again, just to play off what Nick said a little bit. I don't, I think what we try to do in our practice is to foresee eventualities down the road. I think one of the things that gives me great comfort in the cannabis space is I always go back. It's even in my bio at the firm. Most people at this point, after practicing for almost 30 years, as I have forgotten their undergraduate education in terms of scratching their head and say, what did I even do as an undergrad? I had a very powerful undergraduate education, majoring in sociology and psychology, which seems, a little bit, unless I were maybe a family law attorney or something like that, it seems very far afield from practicing tax, corporate, securities, et cetera, which is sort of the backbone of my practice. But when you get into spaces like I am in terms of industries, cannabis, very heavy, sports law, entertainment law, very heavy. All of this really comes in. And I really try to, one of the things that I really try to do is not only on a micro level to understand where my clients are coming from, what their needs are, what their goals, not just as a business or an entity, but as human beings. I try to do that on a macro level as well. Just to give you an example, New York State is now giving priorities. I just read this yesterday, I think.
That's right. Yep.
Giving priority to, in terms of licensing, to those that have been, convicted under past laws or had issues with cannabis law, with possession and so forth, and under laws that are now moot in the state of New York. So microcosm, yes, but I feel like we're coming around as far as cannabis goes. As Nick said, the first thing that we do as attorneys, the priority of all, is to protect our clients. So in that sense, I think the thing that keeps me up most is the idea that a regulator, in this case, perhaps the IRS, hasn't necessarily caught up with the emerging state of the law, and that we know we're going to win. We know we're right on the law, but it's a matter of, we don't want to have to fight needless battles, which costs our clients money. And contrary to popular belief, as lawyers, our objective is not to run up our clients' tab. We want to be doing things that are proactive, that are going to make our clients more money and expand their business. We don't want to get embroiled in a battle with a regulator of any sort on the client. That's money that the client considers wasted, but perhaps necessary. We don't want to do anything to make it more necessary.
And Nick and Michael, I've talked to Michael a couple of weeks ago, and he explained to me something about the tax code that you guys have figured out that may kind of have a big impact on the farming industry. Which one of you guys wants to explain that?
I think we'll both work on it, but Nick, you want to open it up at a high level, and I can, work on it from there.
Yeah. So there's a practice in the ag world outside of cannabis, whereby income is deferred. And so we're looking at some income deferment strategies. And my involvement in that is looking at whether or not Section 280E would impact those strategies. And we don't see that it does. Section 280E, Josh, affects deductions and credits. And these ag strategies are income deferment strategies, which Section 280E does not impact. There's nothing in the IRS rules that says that I can find that says that a cannabis, or that an illegal, somebody who grows something illegally isn't a quote farmer for purposes of the Internal Revenue Code. So these methods are out there, and they've been used by ag for a long time. And so we're trying to help our clients out and see if we can't utilize some of these strategies in order to save them some money.
Michael, do you want to expound on that a little bit, and do us all a favor and explain what that 280E clause is, just
Okay.
in case people aren't familiar with that, and really don't understand it. Go ahead.
Jimmy, if you're in the cannabis industry, you know what, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, I'm going to go back to you for the 280E explanation
Okay.
because you live and breathe that world. I mean, I
Okay.
know what it is, but I'm
I've
going back
watched
to
it.
you because whenever somebody needs a good explanation of 280E, I said, hold on a minute. I'm going to get the Encyclopedia Britannica of 280E on the phone, and
It's
the
a
next
very
4
short
digits
code
I push are
provision,
Nick's extension.
it's okay. I can handle it.
Okay.
No, it basically makes it so that cannabis companies cannot take their deductions. And so Section 280E something says something like, no deductions are allowed for a trade or business that traffics in a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance. And so a deduction is a special creature in the tax code that for businesses are allowed to take a current deduction of costs rather than having to put them onto something like cost of goods sold or something like that. So it's where you have to wait till something is sold or wait till your basis is recuperated or something else like that. You get to take that cost now. And so 280E says, hey, cannabis industry or traffickers in controlled substances, which Jimmy, by the way, which should include the illegal opioid industry. And the IRS is not looking at those guys. And I know I'm getting a little bit askew here, but that's something that I want to talk about because they're in violation of the Controlled Substances Act too. 280E says Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. Anyway, that's what 280E is. It is a creature of the war on drugs. It was created in order to take the profits out of selling illegal drugs. And it has been used in many ways that have been disproportionately horrible for minorities and people of color and everything else. And so it is all tied to that, and it really works. It does take the profit out of most marijuana businesses, and it hurts the little guy way more than it hurts the big guy because it creates really, really, really thin margins. Which if you have higher volume, you can still make money off of. But if you're a mom and pop, you're scraping by.
Right.
Jimmy, that's the perfect segue. It really is. Nick really teed it up in a multitude of ways that he may not even be aware of. Nick's reference to the war on drugs and to the fact that so many of these opioids and everything are not on that schedule or not 280E. I guess I would preface what I'm going to say by the fact that so much of what goes on, even in areas as mundane to most people, exciting to people like Nick, myself, but as tax law, is highly political, highly political. And Nick explained in a way that is detrimental how political some of this stuff is in referencing the war on drugs, referencing social justice issues and racial justice issues and the adverse effect that some of these laws have had over the years on people of color, minorities, etc. I'm going to reference something that happened to be political. Now it's over 100 years ago, so the politics was a little bit different, but that actually creates an opportunity. And that's actually, in retrospect, not a bad thing. Let's go back 103 years or so. I think my math is right, but I was told by Jimmy and Josh that there would be no math. But when we were more of an agrarian society, and when to that end, farmers and I'm not talking about cannabis farmers or hemp farmers, I'm talking about just plain old vanilla farmers, okay, had commanded a much bigger presence in Washington, D.C. in terms of their lobbying power and so forth. So where am I going with this? You've got a code section in the Internal Revenue Code called 453 or 453. It is the installment sale provision. Now, what does that mean? If I want to buy Jimmy's house, but I can't get a loan from a bank and Jimmy wants to sell me his house, all right? Jimmy can do seller financing, okay? And the tax code makes it possible for me to pay Jimmy some combination of principal and interest, year in and year out, and Jimmy to be able to to time the payment of taxes upon his income to when he receives it, and so forth and so on. Now, for 20 years, I've been involved in legal, per the IRS, black letter law, no tax shelters or anything funky, tax deferral strategies, 1031 exchanges on real estate, and 453 using for the sale of businesses and other highly appreciated assets from a capital gains perspective. Okay. So when you sell something really big and you've got major capital gains liability on an asset that you've been paying taxes on for years and years and years and years, the idea that you're not going to get hit with a monster tax in 1 year, and we're going to work that out and time it and everything else. Now, I could talk to you for 3 hours on that. I won't. But in my work with 453, one of the things that I uncovered, and I did this in consultation with some people from outside the firm and so forth, but we've really embraced this in the ag space as a firm, is the idea that companies like International Paper, Land O'Lakes Butter, Blue Diamond Almonds, and hundreds of other large ag producers use 453, and here's where the politics comes back in, and certain safe harbors that are baked into 453 that most people outside of big ag corps don't know anything about, to actually time the payment of taxes and create a situation where no taxes are paid in a current year, and all the money comes back to them, and those taxes are kicked way forward, and some money is placed into a fund so that there's the creation for pennies on the dollar of the eventual payment of those taxes 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And to Nick's point, all of that money, and in California, we're talking about, for example, a combined tax rate of over 50%, 37% on the federal and over 13% on the state. And here's where the math does come in. Now, instead of paying 49 and change, of receiving 49 cents and change on the dollar, okay, our strategy will actually return 100 cents on the dollar, less whatever fees are involved, and they're nominal compared to the tax savings to the grower of almonds or whatever. Now, when Nick and I got together, we scratched our heads and said, would this be applicable to cannabis as well? Does cannabis fit in with that ag exception? And I give a lot of credit to Nick for really opening that door. And what we found, and what Nick alluded to earlier in our discussion, was that it does. And it really, this will blow the doors off of the cannabis growing industry, potentially extending to dispensaries and stuff. I want to focus right now on the growers for the sake of this conversation, because we know it applies to them. And we're talking about not paying any taxes in the current year, creating for a small amount of money a fund to pay the taxes way down the road, and being able to deploy all of that income and revenue back into the operation currently.
All right, we're right up against the 4:20 mark on Friday afternoon. When we come back, Michael's going to explain exactly what he said so that I can understand it. Okay, and I'm guessing you guys too. Let me ask before we go to the break, Michael, do you know who Jonathan Edwards is?
Sure.
Oh, good. Nick Richards, have you ever heard Shanty by Jonathan Edwards?
Play it for me, Jimmy.
All right. Josh, Seattle, have you ever heard of Jonathan Edwards and Shanty?
No.
Okay. This is my song, my 420 song. Okay. When we heard this song on the radio back in the 70s, this was the song that triggered activities. We didn't go to the Louis Pasteur statue like the guys from California did. We just lit up. Okay. I'm perfectly honest about that. It's exactly what we did. This is Jonathan Edwards. We always take this break at 4:20 on Friday. Listen to it. You'll enjoy it. And when we come back, we're going to get more into how this little legalese, if you will, can change not just the cannabis growing community, but the whole farming world. That is what we'll talk about when we come back. Don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 1900. I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you gonna do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow. Josh, That's your cue. Are you going to do a show reset or not?
It's all you, Jimmy. Yeah.
All right, all right. You know, it's not difficult. I bet Nick can do it. Nick, can you do
Hi,
it?
welcome back. My name's Nick Richards here with Pro Cannabis Media. I got me the biggest stars in the whole land today. I got Josh, I got Jimmy, I got Michael. We are rolling.
That's actually pretty good, Nick. I got to tell you. The name of the show, of course, is Green Rush Live. We're here every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Pro Cannabis Media. And we are talking with a few of our attorney friends from Greenspoon Marder. They're a national law firm that is based in, are you based in Littleton, Colorado, Nick?
No. I go home there.
Okay.
I do. I go home there.
So is it Denver?
So we have 26 offices across the country. Our headquarters is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Yeah, I'm based in Littleton, but that's Denver you see behind me there. That's not Littleton.
I get it. All right. I get that. All right. Now, before we went to the break and heard Jonathan Edwards sing Shanty, I threw a question into the chat room. The first person to email me at my company email, and I put that in the chat room, the name of the 3 counties that make up the Emerald Triangle will get one of our limited edition, because I've only got about 46 of these, Pro Cannabis Media t-shirts with my signature saying, "It's a whole new world of weed." Here, I'll do it this way. Right, Dan? There we go.
Very nice, Jimmy.
You notice how he says 46. He knows exactly how many he's signed and how many t-shirts are there. It's not about 50. It's not about 45. He knows there's 46 t-shirts.
46. That's right.
I mean, one thing, I got that chat box up. I don't see anything in there.
Well, I'm waiting to see if anybody has emailed me yet. And no, I have not seen that, but I'll go back to us. And okay, so John Phantom says Humboldt is one. That was the easiest one. And by the way, at this point, okay, there is something called Google that you could probably find this out in a matter of seconds. And you can email me at Jimmy at Pro Cannabis Media, and I'll send you a t-shirt. All right. So let's go back to the tax strategy that you guys have uncovered. And how revolutionary is this? And who knows about this now, guys?
Nick, you want me to take this, or you want to do it?
Everything we do is revolutionary, Jimmy. But I can't. I've been to that Green Triangle area many times, but I can't remember any of it.
Okay. That being said, is this tax strategy going to change the farming industry? Nick?
It is being used in the farming industry generally. It does change change the industry is a big word, Jimmy. It'll put more money in people's pockets. It'll allow them to grow companies and utilize their revenue in their early years to grow their company and defer their tax liability to later years when they can hopefully take those funds and invest them and get to a point where the economics make sense on all of that kind of stuff, and they do generally in time value of money theory and all that kind of stuff. And I would say as far as the cannabis industry goes, it's particularly attractive because we mentioned social equity earlier, right? And expungement clinics and stuff like that. We're looking back now and we're saying, wait a minute, that was not fair. That was not right. What happened to those people? Well, if you're in the industry right now, you're saying the same thing about Section 280E, that's not right. That can't, it was a thorn and a stab to the industry's heart because everyone thought it would not be true. And when it turned out to be true, it was so painful that it really is the thing that is holding the industry back. And so if you can take that and push it off into the future and delay the event, maybe in the future there is no 280E tax. Maybe at that point we've come to the position of, hey, wait, that wasn't fair. We should give that back too, right? And I'll also say that the law on Section 280E is not yet resolved. We don't really yet know if it is truly constitutional or not beyond the United States tax courts and the lower federal courts rulings, because the Ninth Circuit failed to rule on the constitutional questions in the patient's mutual case. And so that's hopeful. It probably, if you've been following the cannabis various things out there, you learn not to be hopeful, right? But yeah, generally speaking, delaying a taxable event is a good thing.
All right. Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
I'd go one step beyond where Nick went. I think, again, being sort of a student of Washington, D.C. and what goes on there, I think when you've got an institution like the Supreme Court, and people say, oh, Supreme Court, and they try to divide up 6-3 conservative justices, liberal justices, and you've got, rumblings and some offhanded comments by the most conservative member, perhaps, of the court, that being Justice Thomas, about everything with respect to to cannabis and enforcement of cannabis laws and scheduling and everything else. I think that there is an awareness on the entire political spectrum, with some notable exceptions. You're going to have some people probably that still believe in the prohibition of alcohol, and you're never going to change those people. But I think it is an absolute minority in Washington, small m minority, that is still under the impression that people need to be protected from cannabis. As far as revolutionary goes, I mean, you take 280E, which is a huge thorn in the side financially of growers out there, but you just take any business. It's not, and again, I'm looking at this from an equity standpoint. One of the things that I try to do, and one of the things that's a hallmark of my practice outside the cannabis industry, is to take some of the tricks that I've learned in dealing with entities of considerable wealth, as well as high net worth and ultra high net worth families, individuals, couples, etc., and to try to bring some of those tricks of the trade down to your regular, more run-of-the-mill people. And the idea that from a general ag standpoint, there is a legal way to time and defer and take some control back over the way, the timing, the amount, and so forth. Ultimately, you're going to pay the same amount of taxes, but do you want to pay those taxes now, or do you want to set a few dollars aside each month and pay them, let them accrue and pay them 40 or 50 years from now? That's all completely legal, kosher, whatever word you want to use, within the framework of the IRS. We're not going outside the black letter law of the Internal Revenue Code for anything that we do in the tax deferral area. Notice I didn't say tax avoidance area, tax deferral area. But that deferral is worth a lot of money in the pockets of growers of all different types of agricultural products, including cannabis, and the power that they have to reinvest in their businesses, to expand, to diversify. Maybe they don't want to be solely in cannabis. Maybe they want to take some of that money that they would have paid to the government and invested in Berkshire Hathaway stock. Whatever, they can do that, and that makes them more powerful. It gives them more staying power as companies, and they need to be around for a while, because this industry is solid, it's growing, and we don't want to see this industry get dominated by a handful of powerful entities. We want to see this be a democratic institution where everybody can play.
Yeah, it's fair, and certainly the pie is big enough. Josh, I want to get your reaction to what you just heard from our two attorney friends, and what impact do you think it will have down the road on this industry? Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, the financial impact of 453 is interesting, but I think in order to understand that and kind of have a full understanding, you have to compare that to what impact 280E would have if you were to remove that. So the financial impacts of 280E and being able to write off labor, which is probably your most expensive, or at least one of your most expensive line items, and the ability to write off that labor is going to make a lot of these pot stocks immediately overnight look a lot more advantageous, a lot more profitable, and have their bottom line, the profitability, look a lot better. So right off the bat, just from a fundamental standpoint, it's going to have a huge impact. And yet that's probably minuscule by comparison to what, at least from my understanding, I've never heard of it before, just hearing it now, but I can just know that a small little segment of 280E versus having complete tax deferral is a massive opportunity. And we're all focusing on 280E, and yet 453 seems like a crazy opportunity. I say hyperbolic stuff like 85% of all CBD companies will fail unless they have an entity in Puerto Rico utilizing Act 60, not paying federal income tax and saving 37% and having that margin, because we're talking about thin razor margins in agriculture. Cannabis is just, one of those. So if someone's in Puerto Rico and they're competing against someone in California, how can you compete with somebody making 37% more than you? And the short answer is that you don't. There is no competition to that. So every entity, every 453, 280E, you're clinging on to the hope of increasing your margins. And these are just one of those tools in order to be able to do that and try to compete and pivot to stay relevant for one more day.
Bud Tracker wins the t-shirt, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. The chat room is starting to go back and forth a little bit, which is always fun. I got to ask a question of all three of you guys. Nick, you said something off the top that I didn't jump on, but I'm going to go back to it now. You're actually confident that our federal government can institute a regulatory system to legalize the cannabis plant. And I want to know, is the plant going to fall under the Department of Agriculture, Food and Drug Administration, or the DEA?
Yes.
Yes, all three. Is that what you're saying?
ATF.
ATF is the other one, right? Alcohol and tobacco and firearms, right? So we have all these entities in DC, and you're confident that one of them, all of them, little bits and pieces of each one of them. I have not heard anybody in the industry that is confident about our federal government coming up with a plan that makes sense.
Are you saying I said that?
Yeah, you did. I heard you say it. I was like,
well,
confident about federal?
Well, let me say this. So we actually had, I think actually it's a little bit of an exciting time on that. We saw two Republican bills come out last year, right? And there's a lot of talk around those two bills, and of course Schumer bill. We're going to see a revised Schumer bill come out in the next couple of months, so that's very exciting as well. So I think that what one of the things that I thought of earlier in our discussion around sort of the impact and where the states are and all that kind of stuff. The fact that we have these two Republican bills out there is a big deal, because now both sides are showing their cards. Both sides are saying, hey, this is what we think will work. And the exciting thing about the states reform bill, I think the Nancy Grace bill, is 3% tax on the federal bill.
Right.
That's a great rate for the industry. The industry should be rallying behind that. I think there's some problems with that bill, of course, but there's always problems with the bill. And a 3% tax in the federal tax like that would really help the industry get past, one of its biggest problems, which is, those folks who are not part of the industry, the traditional market. And so, that was a big disappointment when we saw some of those early legislation from Schumer had 15 to 25% tax. That's not going to help anybody. No. Boy, now, Michael, we're really looking to defer some tax, right? But the point is that, Jimmy, that tax is the price of legalization, but we cannot tax it so high that it prevents legalization from eliminating the problems that legalization is supposed to overcome, right? But the reality of it is that there will be the tax. If you're a cannabis company out there and you're thinking, man, I can't wait till 280E goes away because then we'll be able to make all this money. think again, there's going to be another tax. And it's not just going to go away 100%, right? So, that's not a realistic, planning objective.
So let's get back to my alphabet soup question. Where do you think will there be a separate cannabis regulatory board?
What do we need that for, Jimmy?
I don't think we need it at all. You got enough you have so much red tape in DC. They can't even decide who's going to handle hemp and how much CBD is going to be allowed to go into food and drug.
I'll play devil's advocate with that one, because the
Go ahead.
banking industry has an SRO. They're the ones that have a self-regulatory organization. So they implement all of the rules for themselves and then hand that over to government and make it way too complicated so that they don't want to sound stupid and bruise their egos, so they don't ask a lot of questions and then everything gets passed. Cannabis needs to do the same thing. We can't expect that the senators and these bureaucrats are going to do anything for us. We need an SRO, and I think like having the FDA try to absorb cannabis is a failure waiting to happen. Just look what happens in Washington State when we dissolve the liquor control board and make it the liquor and cannabis board. They didn't want to deal with cannabis. We threw it at them and they hate us. And it's evident in a lot of their policies and legislature. So having an SRO that's built from the ground up specifically for cannabis that can copy something similar to what the banking industry does, I think it would be a lot more advantageous for the industry than just allowing some of these alphabet soups to gain control and restrict and give it to big ag, big cannabis, and kind of let these small farmers just dwindle out. I was in banking. I saw what the SBA did or didn't do, rather. I never once saw one SBA loan go through in my entire banking career, not one. So look what the states are doing, dragging their feet with social equity. We can't allow the government to do take control. They self-regulatory organization.
I've spoken. That was very good. Right at the end, though, your Wi-Fi kind of chugged a little bit. So can you repeat I get it. We all get that. Self-regulatory would be, I would think, embraced by the industry. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. I am not confident at all with what's going on in Washington, D.C. If anybody watches this show, they know that I'm pretty outspoken about that. I think our two-party system is broken. I think that we have too many senators hanging around for 50 years. Term limits have to be put in place because that Senate does not look like our country. The House of Representatives has a little bit better reflection of what's going on in our country right now, not the Senate. That being said, I want to get Nick and Michael involved with this discussion. A self-regulatory board, can that happen, guys?
In theory, I mean, my frame of reference is actually from the securities industry, is FINRA. And, I'm going to get pilloried if any of my FINRA people see this, but FINRA is one of the most dysfunctional organizations that's out there. For anyone that doesn't know, FINRA is the financial and regulatory authority that self-polices the securities, quote unquote, industry. Basically, in lay terms, stockbrokers, brokerage houses, that kind of thing. And FINRA has basically it's sort of the tail wagging the dog. FINRA has taken such extraordinary steps. It's what we call form over substance in many cases, that, if you miss a day here on a deadline, or you didn't cross this T or dot this I, you're out of business, or you're fined an arbitrary $25,000 or $100,000. And when you're talking about small firms, that's real money. It's not real money to Goldman Sachs, but it's real money to your stockbroker down the street that's got a bunch of partners and they're trying to keep their licensure up. So for that reason, and for a number of other reasons, but we've seen a huge migration in the securities industry from the model of the broker dealer, meaning they make their money on transactions, to the model of the registered investment advisor, which is governed solely by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The FINRA is out of the loop entirely, and there are just a lot of financial services professionals out there that are independent, not part of a big Wall Street, firm, that have just said, to heck with it, I'm done. And they've exited and gone to a fee for service. They take an annual fee every year for managing your money. It becomes part of whether if you win, they win, and your money goes down, they make a little less, and so forth, rather than this transactional model that FINRA polices. And it's been a disaster. So I think if you do go with an SRO model, it needs to be one that is very that needs to take a lesson from where FINRA went wrong, because that's a very, very dysfunctional situation over there.
Nick, you want to
Well,
weigh
there's
in on that?
always Jimmy, there's so many regulations that govern, state regulations that govern these cannabis companies already. The federal government doesn't, there will already be jurisdiction in various federal agencies, but they're here in the US, right? These federal agencies have jurisdiction over them. The IRS isn't going away just because we legalize it or anything like that, right? So to me, it doesn't feel like we need more regulation. What we need is the federal government to get out of the way and let the states do it. They're already doing it, and move forward.
Yeah, to me, a simple move off Schedule 1 will have such an impact, positive impact on the industry alone, that it's an administrative. This is what Steve D'Angelo told me years ago. It's an administrative thing, and I think I actually saw some of the U.S. senators are asking if they can go directly to the DOJ to get them to deschedule it. I'm sure I saw that news item over the last 2 weeks. Have you guys seen that?
I know that there's some buy-in by the AG on this, by Merrick Garland. I've read some things that this is a DOJ that's favorable to that, I believe.
Yeah.
And I just go one step further and say, in Washington, everything is about money. And to tie in with everything that we're going through in the wake of COVID, and with a major international, I'm hesitant to use the word World War III, but check in with me in a week or two. But everything that's going on in Europe right now, Ukraine, Russia, etc., potentially involving China, Taiwan, we don't know how far this is going to spread, and also even within Europe, what Putin's got his eyes on next after Ukraine. The bottom line is that we are, you saw at 1:30 in the morning, $1.5 trillion spending bill went through the other night. At 1:30 in the morning, nobody has any idea what's in it at all, except there's some money in there for Ukraine, which is nice. But we are so deep in the hole financially that, apropos of my comments earlier, as far as the inertia in DC to get something done with, as Nick said before, 3%, whatever, is still a heck of a lot of money when it comes to, the demand for cannabis, our ability to grow it, and everything else. That there's going to be some people scratching their heads in Washington, the smart people, that are going to understand that you can backfill a lot of that deficit over time, without gouging the cannabis consuming public by just legalizing and taking a few percentage points. So.
Now,
I'll tell you what's in that bill. So status quo, Jimmy, is what's in that bill. No change. It's still what was formerly known as Rohrabacher Farr is still limited to medical. There's no safe banking in there. It's status quo, I think. Josh, is that what you're seeing in that bill?
status chaos is what it is. Status chaos. At least that's the way I look at it, or stagnation, however you want to look at it. Michael, you brought up what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Our lead story on We Talk News is the detaining of the WNBA superstar and two-time Olympic gold medalist Brittany Griner in Russia for carrying hash oil to an airport. She played professional basketball in Russia as well. This is a very difficult time to deal with Russia. Like, the US is not going to be looking for a favor. Am I right? How ugly can this get? And this is just an opinion, guy, not legal, but I think she's in big trouble myself.
I'll take a first stab at this, and I'll be brief. This has absolutely, positively nothing to do with hash oil or anything else. I promise you that the people over in Russia knew that she was a consumer of of hash oil long before she ever left for the airport or anything else. They did nothing about it. This was an opportunity to detain an American for, for something that was on the surface illegal under Russian law, but they did it to prove a point and to flex their muscles for the United States and the rest of the world. It could have been anything else. They were just looking for a premise to detain her. This is not a hash or a cannabis issue whatsoever. This is a Russia issue. And they, again, the entire time she played over there in the off season, they could have come into her apartment and, arrested her at any time because they know everything.
Did they entrap her? Did they put it in her bag?
I love you, Jimmy, but you're attributing American jurisprudence over to Russia. So in Russia, they would say, entrapment. What is Jimmy talking about? We don't have entrapment. We don't have entrapment over here, So
no, this is what we do here, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like Cheerios in the morning,
All right, one more question I got for you guys about MRBs. Okay, marijuana related businesses. That is the technical term in the banking world for companies like mine that give the industry a voice and also take sponsorship dollars from the cannabis industry. We are an ancillary company. We don't touch the plant. We don't have any links on our site that go to any dispensaries. And we are still an MRB according to the banks. Are they going to ease up on that? I'm starting to see and hear about some banks that have like tier 1 that are plant touching MRBs and tier 2, like a media company, like a container company, like a paper company that is working with the industry and taking money from it. But it is not a plant touching one. Is this where we're at right now? And can we change that?
Jimmy, MRBs, as you call them, need to be concerned about one thing: Form 8300. Okay, Form 8300, Jimmy. If you're providing services to a cannabis company, they're paying you cash. I know we all go, we don't take cash. At some point, you will if you're in this industry, and you need to know about Form 8300. Which is the form that you file when you get more than 10,000 cash from someone. And so that's really, really important for MRBs. The IRS audits those MRBs and makes sure that they're filing their forms 8300. Cool. Which of course is a bank's concern as well. Bank Secrecy Act is what's behind the banks not wanting to have cannabis companies because of the reports that they have to file when you bring in the cash into the bank, right? I don't see any change in this until there's change in banking. And it all comes down to the individual banks and their comfort level. And that all comes down to their clients and how their clients are interacting with their banks. And so I've seen cases where cannabis companies have lost their bank accounts for silly things, but it's really because there's a history of silly things. And the banks get to the point where they're like, look, we're done. Go away.
Yeah. Interesting. We're almost up against it. Josh, I'd like to throw it back to you. Do you want to ask these two fine attorneys any questions or opinions before we say goodbye?
Yeah, curious if you guys think if any of the banks or credit unions are at risk of losing their charter at this point. You have one in Colorado that's going public, a credit union, and it seems kind of mainstream at this point. So if they're willing to go public and disclose all these records, it's signaling to me that money talks and we're here for the long run. So are these just kind of demonstrating to the feds that it's a business that should be implemented and that banks shouldn't worry about losing their charter?
Nick, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay.
Nick?
Yeah, no, don't worry about that. I think that I have seen some things from some banks that I thought was interesting. In order for a bank to be a real big cannabis player, there's some problems around the averages that banks have to have. They can't be overly invested in one class of depositors. Too much risk there. So they have to have a diversified depositor pool. And that gets them into trouble if they're the cannabis bank. And there's some interesting workarounds in that banks deploy that you look and you think, well, if that was a cannabis company, they'd never get away with that. So maybe money does talk. Maybe money does talk. I hope that bank succeeds. I think it's good for the cannabis industry if they do. And it's good for banking if they do as well. The banking thing is silly. It needs to be solved. It's just.
And your representative, Ed Perlmutter, has said he's going to be a pest about getting it, like he hasn't been a pest over the last, 10 years of being in office, but that's his charge. Michael Berwick and Nick Richards from Greenspoon Marder. Look, I always learn when I talk to really smart people like you guys, okay? And I really appreciate you taking the time out to explain this new tax strategy that you've discovered. And if people want to ask you questions, let's give Michael's email out. Michael, how do people find you?
Oh, very simply. You can email me at Michael, Michael, dot or period, whatever you prefer, Berwick, Burwick, at GM, as in General Motors or Greenspoon Marder, whatever you prefer, LAW.com. And I would say you can do the same thing with my partner and colleague and friend, Nick Richards, except it's nick.richards@gmlaw.com.
You don't have to spell it out. I think we got Nick Richards under control.
Nick's got an easier. I mean, Michael Berg's not that
write
difficult.
that down.
I'm going to give you the Cyrillic spelling for all of our Ukrainian and Eastern European.
Wait, I'm getting ready again. Here we go.
Oh, here we go.
There he goes. This is the big finish. All right,
Jimmy.
Nick,
so this is a microfiber moisture cloth. Greenspoon Marder logo. We used to call these do-rags back when I was a kid, but I don't think
I still do.
You still call that a do-rag? Yeah.
I guess I haven't had my formal initiation yet because I don't have one of those, and I'd like to get
How
one.
about the pink sunglasses? Do you have those, Michael?
I don't have those either. My daughter has one. I borrow them from time to time. So.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We've got 3 CEOs who are on hold that are going to join us over the next hour, and we'll meet them after this break. Don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.